The entire room stopped breathing when the man in the graphite suit snapped his fingers and pointed at her like she was an object that had malfunctioned. "Say it again," he said. "Exactly how I said it, word for word." Nia stood with a water carafe in her hands, the silver tray pressed flat against her apron, and felt every eye in the private dining room lock onto her. Not curious eyes, predatory eyes. The kind that measured weakness the way traders measured risk. He had spoken a sentence in another language, fast and casual, like a joke shared among people who could afford to exclude the world. Then he'd looked right at Nia and smiled like he'd set a trap. "Come on," he added, loud enough for the whole table. "You work here. You hear things. You people always hear things." A few of them laughed. Not because it was funny, but because laughing proved they belonged. Nia kept her face neutral. Her heartbeat was the only thing in the room that felt loud. Across the table, the club's security chief, 200 pounds of quiet violence in a black suit, shifted half a step closer. Not to protect her, to remove her. The man in graphite leaned back in his chair and tapped a leather folder with one finger. The folder wasn't a menu. Menus didn't have red ribbons and notarized seals. "You repeat it," he said, softer now, almost kindly, "and we'll all have a good laugh. You refuse, and we'll assume you understood it." Nia's lips parted slightly. That was the point. In this room, understanding was a weapon, and weapons were confiscated. A woman with diamond studs and a tight smile lifted her phone, angling it just enough to catch Nia's face. A souvenir. A humiliation clip for a private group chat. The kind of clip that followed people. Nia felt the air tighten around her. She could taste the truffle and the expensive cologne and something sharper underneath. Control. The man in graphite tilted his head. "Well," he asked, "did the help suddenly forget how to speak?" Nia's hands didn't shake. That was the first mistake they made. They expected trembling. They expected tears. They expected a voice cracking with apology. Instead, she set the carafe down with perfect care, as if the table were made of glass, and she was the only one who knew it. "I didn't hear you clearly," she said. The room reacted like she'd thrown a match. One of the men chuckled, low and mean. Another lifted his brows, amused by her attempt at survival. "Oh, that's convenient," Graphite Suit said, "because it was pretty clear." He turned slightly toward the others, spreading his hands. "You see what I deal with?" he said. "We're about to sign 7 figures and we can't even get sparkling water without an attitude." Nia's eyes flicked to the folder again. 7 figures. That was what he wanted them to focus on. The money. The theater. Anything but the structure. Anything but the names. She saw one name on the corner of a page where the folder had shifted. A foundation. A charity shell. The kind that looked clean until you knew how to read it. Her throat tightened. Not with fear, but with recognition. Because she had seen that same foundation name in a very different context, years ago, under fluorescent lights, sitting across from a man who'd smiled the way this man smiled now, while people with guns waited outside a door. Graphite Suit watched her like he could smell the thought. "You know what?" he said, voice brightening. "Let's make it simple. You're going to be useful, or you're going to be gone." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim black pen, rolling it between his fingers. It didn't look like a pen. It looked like something designed to sign away responsibility. He slid it across the table toward the older man beside him, a bald financier with a pinky ring and tired eyes, and then looked back at Nia. "Repeat what I said," he told her, "in that other language. Prove you're not listening." The woman with the phone leaned in, smiling wider. Or, she said, syrupy, maybe she can't. Maybe she just pretends she doesn't understand so she doesn't have to feel stupid. A second wave of laughter. A third. Soft, controlled, like applause in a room that never clapped for anyone who served. Nia could feel the club around them, the velvet walls that swallowed sound, the hidden cameras in the corners, the discreet exit that led straight to a private elevator. She had worked here long enough to know the rules. No arguments, no scenes, no mistakes. And tonight, the rule was different. No dignity. Her supervisor, Miles, stood near the bar pretending to polish glassware. His face was pale. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He had told her earlier, in a whisper, to stay invisible tonight because the boardroom crowd was in one of their moods. Miles had been wrong. This wasn't a mood. This was a test. The bald financier cleared his throat, not looking up from the folder. "Let's not waste time," he murmured. Graphite Suit didn't take his gaze off Nia. "Oh, we're not wasting time," he said. "This is part of the process. I like to know who's in the room." His eyes drifted over her, taking inventory. Dark hair pulled back, plain black uniform, no jewelry, no name tag. They didn't let staff wear name tags in the Crescent Room. Names made people human. "You got a name?" he asked. "Nia," she answered. He repeated it slowly, tasting it like he was deciding whether it belonged on his tongue. "Nia," he said. "Cute. Where'd you get it?" "From my mother," Nia said. That got a few laughs too, because any mention of a mother in a room like this sounded like a weakness. Graphite Suit leaned forward, elbows on the table, and lowered his voice until it carried anyway. "You know what I think, Nia," he said. "I think you understood every word. I think you're standing there deciding if you're going to be brave." He smiled. "And brave people don't last long around money." The security chief moved another half step, close enough that Nia could see the outline of an earpiece wire disappearing into his collar. The woman with the phone whispered, "This is going to be so good." Nia looked down at the glasses on the table. Crystal, perfectly aligned. She noticed something small, condensation rings that didn't match the placement. A glass had been moved and put back wrong. Someone had been nervous before she walked in. Across from Graphite Suit, a younger man in a navy suit sat silent, hands folded, eyes scanning the room like he was counting exits. He didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He looked alert, almost irritated that Graphite Suit was playing. Nia caught his gaze for half a second. It wasn't a friendly look, but it wasn't cruel either. It was the look of someone who knew a fire was being lit in a room full of gasoline. Graphite Suit noticed the exchange and his smile tightened. "No eye contact," he said lightly. "That's rule 1 for staff, right?" Nia didn't apologize. That too was a mistake in their eyes. Graphite Suit's tone hardened. "Repeat the sentence," he ordered. The bald financier finally looked up, eyes flat. "We have a window," he said. Graphite Suit raised one finger at him without turning around, like a king silencing a servant. One moment. Nia could feel the trap closing. If she repeated it, she'd confirm she understood. If she refused, they'd claim she understood and punish her anyway. If she made a mistake, they'd have their clip and their excuse. She chose the only thing they hadn't planned for: precision. "I can repeat it," she said. The room went still again. Even the ice in the bucket seemed to stop settling. Graphite Suit's eyes gleamed. The woman with the phone lifted it higher. Nia continued, calm. "But before I do," she said, "I need to clarify one thing." Graphite Suit blinked, caught off guard by the word clarify. It sounded like paperwork. It sounded like competence. It didn't belong to someone holding a water carafe. What thing? He asked. Nia nodded toward the folder, just slightly. Are you asking me to repeat it? She said. Because you want to embarrass me? Or because you want to make sure everyone at this table understands what you just slipped into that contract? She let the question hang in the air like a glass about to fall. The bald financier's face changed first. Not anger, not amusement. Alarm. The younger man in navy suit straightened, eyes sharpening, like a weapon being unsheathed. Graphite Suit's smile didn't move, but something colder slid behind his eyes. What did you just say? He asked. Nia didn't raise her voice. I asked, she said, which reason you're really here for. She kept her hands steady on the tray, as if she hadn't just pulled the pin on a grenade in a velvet room. The security chief's hand went to his jacket. Not openly. Not for anyone to notice. Just enough for Nia to see it and understand the language everyone in power spoke fluently. Graphite Suit stared at her for a long beat, then leaned back and laughed once, sharp and controlled. Oh, he said, so the waitress thinks she's in the meeting. Nia met his eyes. She didn't flinch. No, she said. I think the meeting is pretending it doesn't need the waitress. The older man with the folder slowly closed it, his fingers suddenly not as steady as they were a minute ago, and the sound of that leather cover sealing shut was the loudest sound in the room. Earlier that evening, before the velvet room filled with money and teeth, Nia had already known it would be a bad night. She felt it the moment she stepped out of the elevator and into the private club's upper floor, where the lighting was too soft and the silence cost extra. The Crescent Room wasn't listed on the club's website. No photos, no reservations through the front desk. You were invited, or you didn't exist. Nia adjusted the cuffs of her black uniform and checked her reflection in the smoked mirror near the service corridor. Hair tight, face neutral, no tells. She had learned that part the hard way. Miles was waiting by the bar, shoulders tense, wiping the same spotless glass over and over. When he saw her, he didn't smile. They're here tonight, he said quietly. Nia didn't ask who. She didn't need to. They booked the Crescent for 6 hours, Miles went on. No walk-ins, no interruptions, no mistakes. His eyes flicked toward the discreet security panel embedded in the wall. Biometric locks, cameras she knew fed to an off-site room, panic buttons no one ever admitted existed. Who's they? She asked anyway. Miles hesitated. That alone was an answer. Boardroom types, he said finally. Private equity, sovereign money, a couple of partners, the kind who don't like explaining themselves. Nia nodded. She picked up her tray. Same rules? She asked. Miles exhaled. Stricter. Speak only when spoken to. If they joke, you laugh lightly. If they insult you, you don't react. If they ask something you don't understand, I ask for clarification, Nia said. Miles grimaced. You don't. You smile and say you'll get your supervisor. She met his eyes. If they ask me directly, especially then, Miles said. This room eats people. Nia gave a small nod, the kind that ended conversations. She walked the perimeter before the guests arrived, checking placements the way she always did. Chairs, sight lines. Which corners swallowed sound? Which corners didn't? The Crescent Room was designed to feel intimate while making escape inconvenient. No visible exits, no windows. The private elevator door blended into the wall like an art piece. She noticed the folder on the center table long before anyone else did. Leather, red ribbon, notarial seals pressed deep enough to leave impressions in the grain. Contracts like that weren't about money. They were about consequences. The guests arrived without announcement. No grand entrance. No raised voices. Just a subtle shift in the room, like pressure dropping before a storm. Nia stood by the service station as they took their seats. 6 men. 1 woman. Graphite Suit sat where the light hit him cleanly. Posture relaxed, smile rehearsed. He carried himself like someone used to rooms bending toward him. To his left, the bald financier with the ring moved slower, heavier, like a man who had already paid for his power and was tired of the interest. Across from them, the younger man in navy watched everything without touching his drink. The woman, expensive dress, controlled smile, chose her seat carefully, angling herself toward Graphite Suit, away from everyone else. Proximity is currency. Nia served water first, sparkling for 3, still for 2. One requested ice, then waved it off like a test. No one said please. As she poured, she listened. Not to the words, to the rhythm. Who interrupted whom? Who waited? Who pretended not to hear? Graphite Suit did most of the talking. The bald financier nodded often, but spoke rarely. The woman laughed on cue. The man in navy barely spoke at all. That was the second thing Nia noticed. The third came when the folder was opened. Graphite Suit slid it across the table, tapping it with that black pen. Standard framework, he said lightly. Nothing you haven't seen. The bald financier flipped pages too quickly for someone reading. The woman leaned in, pretending to follow along. The man in navy didn't touch it at all. He watched Nia instead. She felt his eyes the way you feel heat through glass. She moved on, setting bread plates, aligning silverware, keeping her head down. But she caught fragments, not sentences, shapes. Foundation roots the exposure. Language adjusted for cross-border. No jurisdictional conflict if... They weren't using technical jargon. They were simplifying on purpose. That was another tell. Nia reached the far end of the table and paused to refill a glass that was still half full. It gave her an extra second. Graphite Suit's voice dropped. And once it's signed, it's clean, he said. No one looks twice. The man in navy shifted. Just slightly. People always look twice, he said quietly. Graphite Suit smiled without turning. Not at this level. Nia straightened and stepped back, her pulse steady but alert. That foundation name surfaced again. Casually. Like it was a footnote. It wasn't. She had seen it years ago on a screen, in a room with no windows, paired with different names and the same outcome. Back then, it had been a warning. Now it was bait. When Graphite Suit finally noticed her again, it wasn't accidental. He waited until she was close enough to hear him without raising his voice. You ever hear anyone speak in another language and think they're talking about you? He asked the table, smiling. A few chuckles. He looked at Nia. Hey, he said, you hear that? She paused, exactly as trained. Yes, sir? He switched languages mid-sentence, smooth and quick, the way people did when they wanted to exclude without effort. The woman laughed. The bald financier smirked. The phone came out. Graphite Suit turned back to her. Well, he said. What did I say? Nia held his gaze, already knowing the night had crossed a line it wouldn't uncross. I'm sorry, she said. Could you repeat that? His smile widened. That was when she understood. This wasn't about translation. It was about control. And control, once tested, never stopped at one question. The sentence Graphite Suit had spoken wasn't complicated. That was the cruel part. It wasn't poetic or rare or impressive. It was practical, functional, the kind of phrasing people used when they didn't want attention, only compliance. Nia heard it clearly the first time. She just pretended she hadn't. Could you repeat that? She asked, keeping her tone flat. Graphite Suit obliged, slower now, enunciating each word like he was teaching a child. He let the room enjoy it. Let the power stretch. The woman laughed again. Oh my God, she said, turning to the others. He thinks she understands. The bald financier didn't laugh. He watched Nia instead, his mouth pressed thin, as if he were recalculating. The man in navy shifted in his chair. Still silent, still watching. Graphite Suit finished the sentence and leaned back. Well? He asked. Care to translate? Nia's mind did what it always did under pressure. Stripped everything down to structure. The sentence wasn't an insult. It wasn't even about her. It was a confirmation. A phrase used in negotiations to signal that a liability had been accounted for without explicitly naming it. A way of saying this problem is no longer a problem without leaving fingerprints. If she repeated it out loud, even in English, she would be acknowledging it. And acknowledgement was consent. I'm sorry, she said evenly. I don't translate conversations I'm not part of. The air changed. Graphite Suit's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, barely visible, but enough. The woman's laughter died abruptly. The phone lowered. That's funny, Graphite Suit said, because you're standing right here. Nia nodded. Physically, a few of the men chuckled, uncertain now. The joke wasn't landing cleanly anymore. Graphite Suit leaned forward again, elbows on the table. You're very confident for someone pouring water, he said. Is that part of the service here? Miles stirred at the bar, visibly uncomfortable. He took a step forward, then stopped. He knew better. Nia met Graphite Suit's eyes. It's part of listening, she said. Oh? He tilted his head. Then tell me what you heard. This time, the challenge was different. Quieter, sharper. The bold financier cleared his throat. Let's stay on track. Graphite Suit didn't look away from Nia. We are on track, he said. I just like knowing who's around when I speak. Nia glanced at the folder again. Just a glance. Enough to be noticed. I heard, she said carefully, that you believe what's written there can't hurt anyone at this table. The silence that followed wasn't theatrical. It was instinctive. The man in navy stiffened. The bald financier's fingers tightened on the edge of the folder. The woman's smile slipped, just enough to show teeth. Graphite Suit straightened slowly. Careful, he said. I am, Nia replied. The woman scoffed. This is ridiculous. She's guessing. Nia turned to her, polite. I'm not. The security chief moved again. Closer now, presence filling the space behind Nia like a shadow. Graphite Suit exhaled through his nose, amused in a way that wasn't. Let me make something clear, he said. You don't get to speculate. You don't get to imply. You serve drinks, and then you disappear. Nia nodded. Understood? And, he added, voice lowering, you don't get to look at private documents. She looked back at him. Then you shouldn't leave them open. That did it. The bald financier slammed the folder shut, the sound sharp enough to echo. Enough, he said. This isn't productive. Graphite Suit didn't smile anymore. No, he said softly, but it's informative. He turned his chair slightly, angling himself toward Nia like a judge settling in. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to repeat the sentence, in English, right now. And if I don't? Nia asked. He glanced at the security chief, then back at her. Then you walk out of here without a reference, he said. And every place like this hears about it. You'll never work within 10 blocks of real money again. Miles swallowed hard. The woman lifted her phone again. The man in navy finally spoke. "Let her go," he said quietly. Everyone turned. Graphite Suit's smile returned, thin and sharp. "You're not in charge of staffing." "No," the man in navy agreed. "But I am in charge of risk." His eyes flicked to Nia, then back to the folder. "And she's not wrong," he said, "about what that language implies." The bald financier went very still. Graphite Suit's jaw tightened. Nia didn't move, didn't speak. She let the words do their damage. Graphite Suit studied the man in navy for a long moment, then laughed softly. "This," he said, gesturing between them, "is exactly why I like tests." He looked back at Nia. "One last chance," he said. "Translate." Nia took a slow breath. "If I do," she said, "someone at this table becomes disposable." The woman scoffed again, but there was no humor in it now. "That's absurd." Nia met her gaze. "So is pretending language doesn't have consequences." The security chief's hand slid fully inside his jacket. Graphite Suit watched Nia the way a man watched a safe. He was deciding whether to crack or move. "You think you're smarter than everyone here," he said. "No," Nia replied. "I think I'm paying attention." She paused. "And I think you're testing the wrong person." The man in navy leaned back slightly, eyes never leaving Graphite Suit. "If she's right," he said, "and you push this, you don't just embarrass her." Graphite Suit glanced at him. "You expose yourself." That landed. The room didn't erupt. It compressed. Graphite Suit tapped the table once with his finger. "Interesting," he said. "Very interesting." He looked at Nia, eyes cold now, measuring. "Sit tight," he said. "We're not done." Nia inclined her head. She didn't sit. She waited. They didn't ask her to leave. That was how Nia knew things had shifted. Graphite Suit waved a hand, dismissing the tension like it was smoke. "Relax," he said to the table. "We're just having a conversation." No one relaxed. The bald financier loosened his tie, then tightened it again. The woman checked her phone, not recording now, typing. The man in navy leaned back, crossing his arms, gaze fixed on the folder as if he could see through leather. Graphite Suit turned to Nia again, voice smooth. "Why don't you get us another round?" he said. "Take your time." It sounded generous. It wasn't. She nodded and stepped away, moving toward the service corridor. As soon as her back was turned, the room erupted in low voices. "This is a distraction. She shouldn't be here. You said this language was airtight." The private elevator chimed softly behind her. Nia didn't look back. In the corridor, her breath came a little faster. Not panic, focus. She set the tray down and let her hands rest on the counter until her pulse evened out. She replayed the fragments she'd heard. Foundation routing exposure, cross-border language, no jurisdictional conflict. It wasn't a single illegal act. It was a chain. Each link plausible. Together, lethal. Someone at that table was being set up to absorb the fallout when regulators finally noticed. The sentence Graphite Suit had used wasn't just confirmation, it was assignment. This is handled. This is off your books. This is now someone else's problem. Nia glanced at the security monitor near the corridor ceiling. The Crescent Room camera feed cycled silently. No audio, but she could read posture. The bald financier was sweating now. The woman leaned in too close to Graphite Suit, whispering. The man in navy hadn't moved. Miles appeared beside Nia, voice barely audible. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You need to get out of this." She looked at him. "They're not letting me." Miles swallowed. "They don't like witnesses." "They already have witnesses," Nia said. They just don't respect them. She picked up a fresh bottle of water and turned back toward the room. When she re-entered, the conversation stopped mid-sentence. Graphite Suit smiled as if nothing had happened. "Ah," he said. "Perfect timing." He gestured to the empty space beside the table. Not a seat, but a standing position closer than before. "Stand here," he said. "I want you to hear this part." The bald financier stiffened. "This isn't necessary." "Oh, it is," Graphite Suit replied. "She's already involved." Nia took her place, close enough now to see the text embossed on the folder's inner flap. A law firm name she recognized. One that didn't lose cases. One that buried them. Graphite Suit opened the folder again. "We were just discussing timing," he said. "Signatures tonight, wire transfers queued for morning, clean handoff." The man in navy finally spoke again. "And the liability?" he asked. Graphite Suit didn't answer immediately. He looked at Nia. "What do you think?" he asked her. The question was casual. The threat was not. The woman scoffed. "Don't encourage this?" Graphite Suit raised a finger, silencing her. Nia chose her words with surgical care. "I think," she said, "that the liability is written to look shared. But it isn't." The bald financier's face drained of color. Graphite Suit's eyes sharpened. "Explain." "The foundation," Nia continued, "creates distance. The language routes exposure through a third party that looks neutral. But the reporting obligations don't disappear. They shift." "To whom?" the man in navy asked. Nia looked directly at the bald financier. "To the person whose name appears last," she said. The room went dead quiet. The bald financier stared at the page, then at Graphite Suit. "You said this was standard?" "It is," Graphite Suit replied smoothly. "Standard for someone." The woman stood abruptly. "This is insane. We're listening to a waitress interpret legal documents?" Nia didn't look at her. "Ask your attorney," Nia said. "The one you didn't invite." The bald financier's hand shook as he reached for his phone. No signal. The crescent room blocked it. The man in navy exhaled slowly. "You're burning bridges," he said to Graphite Suit. "No," Graphite Suit replied. "I'm reinforcing them." He turned back to Nia. "You've made your point," he said. "Now you can leave." She didn't move. "I don't think you want that," she said. His smile vanished. "And why not?" he asked. "Because," Nia said, "if I leave now, the only person in this room who understands the risk is the one you're planning to sacrifice." The bald financier pushed his chair back, standing halfway. "You said this was clean." "It is," Graphite Suit said. "For me." The security chief stepped closer to Nia, close enough that she could feel his breath near her ear. Graphite Suit's voice dropped. "You've done enough," he said. "This ends now." Nia met his eyes. "No," she said. "This is the part where it escalates." The man in navy stood fully now, placing both hands on the table. "If you force this," he said to Graphite Suit, "you lose more than a partner." Graphite Suit laughed softly. "Careful," he said. "You're starting to sound like her." The elevator chimed again. Everyone froze. That elevator wasn't scheduled. Miles looked toward the door, pale. Graphite Suit's smile tightened just slightly. Nia felt it then, the shift she'd been waiting for. Someone else was entering the game, and they hadn't been invited. The elevator doors opened without ceremony, no announcement, no greeting. Just a soft mechanical sound, and a presence that immediately rewired the room. Two men stepped out first, security, but not the clubs. Their suits were darker, cleaner, cut for movement instead of display. They scanned the crescent room with professional indifference, not looking for admiration, only angles. Then the third man emerged. He wasn't tall. He wasn't flashy. He didn't smile. He carried himself like someone who never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. Graphite Suit recognized him instantly. The micro-expression was almost imperceptible, but Nia caught it. The tightening around the eyes, the half-second recalculation. "Gentlemen," the newcomer said calmly. "Apologies for the interruption." The bold financier exhaled like a man finding air after being underwater. The man in navy straightened, alert now in a different way. Graphite Suit recovered quickly. He stood, extending a hand. "Didn't expect to see you tonight," he said. "This was meant to be informal." The newcomer didn't take the hand. "I'm aware," he replied. "That's why I'm here." His gaze slid to the table, the open folder, the pen resting where a signature should have been. Then it moved, finally, toward Nia. He paused. Just long enough. Graphite Suit noticed. "This is staff," he said quickly. "We were just finishing up." The newcomer looked back at him. "No," he said. "You weren't." He turned to Nia. "You," he said. "What's your role here?" Nia felt the room tense, waiting to see how she would answer. She could claim ignorance. She could retreat. She could vanish. She didn't. "I work the floor," she said. "Tonight, apparently, I'm also the warning label." The woman scoffed, sharp and brittle. "Are we really doing this?" The newcomer ignored her. "What's your name?" He asked Nia. "Nia," she said. He nodded once, then looked back at Graphite Suit. "She's right," he said. "About the structure." Graphite Suit's jaw tightened. "You read it already?" he asked. "I didn't need to," the newcomer replied. "I recognized the foundation." The bald financier's hands clenched into fists. "You told me this was shared exposure," he said to Graphite Suit, voice shaking now. "You told me—" "I told you what you needed to hear," Graphite Suit snapped. The newcomer raised a hand and the room obeyed. "This ends now," he said calmly. "The signatures don't happen tonight." Graphite Suit laughed, but there was no humor left in it. "You don't have that authority." The newcomer met his eyes. "I do," he said, "and so does she." He nodded toward Nia. The security chief shifted, confused. "Sir?" The newcomer turned slightly. "She's the only person here who understands exactly how this collapses," he said, "which means she's the only one who can decide whether it does." The woman stood abruptly. "This is insane. We're letting a server hold leverage over—" "Sit down," the newcomer said. Not loudly. She sat. Nia felt something settle into place inside her. Not triumph, not relief. Clarity. Graphite Suit looked at her now, without pretense. "What do you want?" he asked. Nia didn't answer immediately. She looked at the bold financier, his fear, his realization. She looked at the man in navy, calculating, already planning exits. She looked at the woman, angry, humiliated, dangerous in a different way. Then she looked back at Graphite Suit. "I want this stopped," she said. "And I want the person you planned to burn to walk out of here clean." The bald financier sagged into his chair. Graphite Suit stared at her, eyes dark. "And if I say no?" Nia held his gaze. "Then I explain the language," she said. Slowly, in English, with examples. The newcomer folded his hands. "And I make sure the explanation reaches the right ears," he added. The silence stretched. Finally, Graphite Suit reached for the pen. He didn't sign. He closed it and set it down. "Fine," he said. "No signatures tonight." The woman hissed something under her breath. The man in navy exhaled. The bald financier looked like he might cry. The newcomer nodded once. Good, he said, because there's something else we need to discuss. He turned to Nia. You shouldn't be here, he said, which means someone put you here on purpose. Nia felt a chill. I put myself here, she said. The newcomer studied her. Then you're braver than most, he said. Or you already knew this would happen? Nia didn't answer, because the truth was worse. She had known, and she had come anyway. The newcomer didn't sit. That alone told Nia more than his credentials ever could. He remained standing at the edge of the table, hands relaxed, posture neutral, like a man who planned to leave at any moment, or shut the room down if he didn't like what he heard. You didn't just interrupt a deal, he said calmly. You intercepted one. His eyes stayed on Nia, not Graphite Suit. That takes either desperation, he continued, or preparation. Graphite Suit scoffed. You're giving her too much credit. The newcomer ignored him. Which is it? He asked Nia. She met his gaze. Preparation. The word landed heavier than she intended. The bald financier looked between them, confused, afraid. You planned this? Nia didn't answer him. The newcomer nodded slowly, as if confirming a theory. Then you already know this isn't over, he said. Graphite Suit laughed again, sharper now. It's over enough. No signatures. Everyone goes home. That's not how this works, the newcomer replied. You don't pull a knife halfway out and call it mercy. Graphite Suit's smile vanished. The security chief shifted again, eyes flicking between the newcomer and his own earpiece. He was waiting for instructions that weren't coming. Nia felt the momentum turning, not toward safety, but toward exposure. What happens next, the newcomer said, depends on what she knows. He gestured to Nia, then finally took a seat, deliberately choosing the chair opposite Graphite Suit. The table realigned around that decision. Talk, Graphite Suit said to Nia. Since you're so prepared. She inhaled slowly. I didn't come here for this deal, she said. I came because of the foundation. The woman stiffened. That foundation is legitimate. Nia looked at her. It's quiet. The woman frowned. What? It doesn't advertise, Nia continued. It doesn't court donors. It doesn't issue press releases. For a charity that size, that's not discretion. That's camouflage. The bald financier swallowed. You said it was for tax efficiency. It is, Nia replied. For one side. She turned to the newcomer. The foundation exists to absorb regulatory heat, she said. Not indefinitely, just long enough for money to move and names to disappear. Graphite Suit leaned back. You're speculating. No, Nia said. I've seen the aftermath. The room tightened. When? The man in navy asked. 3 years ago, Nia said. Different city, same structure, same language. She didn't mention the raid, or the screaming, or the moment she realized the person blamed wouldn't survive the week. You worked in finance? The bald financier asked. Nia shook her head. I worked in translation, analysis, risk interpretation. Graphite Suit smiled thinly. Of course you did. I was hired to make documents sound harmless, Nia said. Neutral, clean. The newcomer's eyes sharpened. And when they weren't? They still sounded clean, she said. That's the problem. The man in navy leaned forward. Why are you here now? Nia hesitated. This was the point of no return, because this time, she said, the person being set up doesn't deserve it. The bald financier looked up sharply. You're talking about me. Nia met his eyes. Yes. His face crumpled, not in shame, but in realization. You said this was a partnership. Graphite Suit didn't deny it. It was, he said, until you became inconvenient. The woman stood again, furious now. This is extortion. No, the newcomer said calmly. This is disclosure. He turned to Nia. If you explain the sentence, he said, what happens? They lose deniability, Nia replied, and someone loses protection. Graphite Suit's voice dropped. You don't know who you're threatening. I do, Nia said, and I know who you think you are. That struck deeper. The newcomer watched Graphite Suit carefully. You brought her in as entertainment, he said. You miscalculated. Graphite Suit leaned forward, eyes cold. And you brought yourself in as what? A conscience? No, the newcomer replied. As containment. He turned to the bald financier. You're walking away from this, he said. Tonight? The bald financier nodded frantically. Yes, of course. Graphite Suit snorted. And you think that's enough? The newcomer looked at him. No, which is why we're changing the terms. He slid the folder back toward the center of the table. No signatures, he said, but the language gets rewritten. Graphite Suit laughed. By who? The newcomer looked at Nia. By her. The room froze again. Nia felt the weight of it settle in her chest. That makes me visible, she said quietly. Yes, the newcomer replied. It does. Graphite Suit smiled, slow and dangerous. Careful, he said. Visibility cuts both ways. Nia met his gaze. So does language, she said. The man in navy exhaled, half a smile touching his mouth for the first time. The woman looked between them, calculating, already planning revenge. The security chief finally received something in his earpiece. He stiffened. Graphite Suit noticed. What is it? He asked. The security chief hesitated. Sir, there are people downstairs, asking questions. The newcomer stood. Time, he said, just ran out. Nia felt it then, not fear, but certainty. The real fight hadn't been the humiliation. It hadn't been the test. It was this moment, when words stopped being shields and became weapons. The questions downstairs weren't coming from club security. Nia knew that before anyone said it. The newcomers' men didn't move to block exits. They moved to positions that suggested delay, not defense. That meant time mattered more than force. Graphite Suit stood slowly, adjusting his cuffs like this was still his room. You invited them? He asked the newcomer. No, the newcomer replied. You did. Graphite Suit smiled thinly. Careful. That accusation carries weight. So does the foundation, the newcomer said. And it's heavier tonight than it was this morning. The security chief stepped closer to Graphite Suit, murmuring something low. Graphite Suit listened, eyes flicking once to the private elevator, then back to Nia. You planned this better than I gave you credit for, he said to her. But you're still out of your depth? Nia didn't answer, because this was the part she'd tried not to think about. The bald financier stood, hands shaking. I want out, he said. Right now. You're out, the newcomer said, but you're not invisible. Graphite Suit laughed softly. No one ever is. The woman finally found her voice again. You can't seriously let her rewrite this, she snapped. She's not even... She is exactly who should, the newcomer interrupted. She understands how this survives scrutiny. Nia felt every eye turn to her again, different now. No longer mocking, measuring. Why you? The man in navy asked quietly. Nia exhaled. Because I already paid the price once, she said. The room stilled. I rewrote language like this before, she continued. I made it sound safe. I made it pass. And when it collapsed, the person blamed didn't get a lawyer. They didn't get a hearing. They disappeared. Graphite Suit's smile didn't move, but his eyes hardened. "And you expect sympathy?" he asked. "No," Nia said. "I expect accountability." The man in navy leaned back, processing. "You vanished after that." "Yes," Nia said. "On purpose." The newcomer studied her. "Then why come back?" Nia looked at the folder again. "Because the same people keep using the same language," she said. "And because this time I recognized the trap before it closed." The bald financier swallowed hard. "You could have walked away." "So could you," Nia replied. "You didn't. Neither did I." Footsteps echoed faintly beyond the crescent room doors now. Voices. Calm, professional. Graphite Suit's fingers tapped once on the table. "If you rewrite it," he said to Nia, "you put your name on it. Figuratively or not, you become part of the record." "I know," she said. "And when this blows back," he added, "it won't be me they ask about." Nia met his gaze steadily. "That's fine," she said. "I've already been asked worse questions." The newcomer nodded once, approving. "Then we do it now," he said, "before anyone else decides for us." He slid the folder toward Nia. Her hands hovered over it for a fraction of a second. This was the moment she couldn't undo. She opened the folder. The language was elegant, deceptive, dangerous in its restraint. She began to speak, not rewriting yet, just explaining. "This clause," she said, tapping a paragraph, "pretends neutrality. It isn't. It assigns responsibility through silence." Graphite Suit watched her closely, no longer smiling. "If you change that," he said, "the deal collapses." "Yes," Nia replied, "or it becomes honest." The woman scoffed. "Honesty doesn't make money." "It keeps people alive," Nia said. The footsteps outside stopped. A knock followed. Polite, controlled. "Private security," a voice called. "We're here to follow up on a report." Graphite Suit straightened. "About?" "Unusual financial activity," the voice replied, "and a few questions about who's in the room." The newcomer looked at Nia. "You have 5 minutes," he said. Nia nodded and picked up the pen. This time, she didn't hesitate. She rewrote the sentence first, the one Graphite Suit had tested her with. She stripped it of implication. She forced it to say exactly what it meant. The bald financier watched, breathing shallow, like someone watching a surgeon work. Graphite Suit's face darkened with every word. When she finished, she closed the folder. "That sentence," she said calmly, "no longer protects you." The knock came again, firmer now. The newcomer stood. "Open the door." The security chief hesitated, then obeyed. As the door opened and unfamiliar faces stepped in, Graphite Suit leaned close to Nia. "This isn't over," he said quietly. She didn't look at him. "I know," she said, "but it's not yours anymore." The man in navy exhaled, something like relief crossing his face. The woman backed away, already texting, already plotting. Nia stepped back from the table as the room filled with new authority, new questions, new lines of power. For the first time that night, she wasn't being watched as staff. She was being watched as a problem. And problems, she knew, didn't disappear quietly. The questions didn't come all at once. They never did. They arrived measured, polite, wrapped in professional tones that carried more threat than shouting ever could. The kind of voices that didn't need to prove authority because they were authority. Nia stepped away from the table and stood near the service station again, hands folded, posture neutral. Old habits. Useful ones. The men who entered didn't wear badges. They didn't need them. Their suits were plain, their eyes sharp, their movements economical. They looked at faces, not decor. "Good evening," one of them said, nodding once to the room. "Apologies for the disruption." Graphite Suit smiled, effortless as ever. "Always happy to cooperate." The man didn't return the smile. "We're following up on a report involving unusual routing through a charitable entity," he said. "This room was listed as a point of contact." The bald financier swallowed audibly. The woman crossed her arms, chin high. "This is private business." "Everything is," the man replied, "until it isn't." He glanced at the folder on the table. "May we?" Graphite Suit hesitated for half a second too long. The man in navy noticed. So did Nia. The newcomer, still standing, still unflinching, gestured toward the folder. "You'll want the revised language," he said, "not the original." That earned him a look. "Revised?" the man asked. "Yes," the newcomer replied. "It was changed moments ago. For accuracy." The man's gaze shifted to Nia. "And who made the revisions?" Nia felt every eye in the room land on her again, heavier now. Different, not judgment. Assessment. "I did," she said. The man studied her. "On whose authority?" Nia glanced at the newcomer, then back at the man. "On the authority of understanding what it said before," she replied. The man considered that. "Walk me through it," he said, not demanded, invited. Nia stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She explained. She explained how one clause created distance without responsibility, how another deferred reporting just long enough to move money beyond reach, how a single sentence, carefully phrased, carefully timed, shifted consequence from the many to the one. She didn't accuse. She described. The room stayed silent. When she finished, the man nodded slowly. "And the revised version?" Nia met his gaze. "It removes ambiguity. It names the risk. It assigns responsibility evenly. It makes the transaction slower, less profitable." "And legal," the man said. "Yes," Nia replied. Graphite Suit laughed, sharp and humorless. "Legal doesn't mean harmless." "No," the man agreed. "But it means traceable." That word landed like a weight. The bald financier sagged in his chair, relief and terror mixing on his face. The woman's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up, eyes hard. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," she said, staring at Nia. Nia looked back. "I do." The man in navy spoke quietly. "She always has." The man with authority closed the folder. "We'll need copies," he said, "and we'll need statements." Graphite Suit straightened. "From everyone?" The man met his eyes. "From anyone whose name appears." Graphite Suit smiled thinly. "Then I suppose this evening has become inconvenient." The man didn't blink. "That's one word for it." Nia felt the tension shift again. Not release, but redistribute. The center of gravity had moved. She was no longer the spectacle. She was the variable. The man turned to her one last time. "You understand," he said, "that this puts you on record?" "Yes," Nia replied. "And that record follows?" "Yes." He studied her for a long moment. "Why take that risk?" he asked. Nia didn't answer immediately, because the truth wasn't noble. "It already follows me," she said finally. "I'm just done pretending it doesn't." The man nodded once. "We'll be in touch," he said. As the questions continued and names were taken, Nia stepped back into the edges of the room again, invisible by choice now, not force. Graphite Suit didn't look at her. Not once. The woman left early, heels sharp against the floor, fury contained like a blade. The bald financier stayed, shaking, answering everything. The man in navy watched Nia as he passed her, expression unreadable. "You changed the board," he murmured under his breath. "No," Nia replied quietly. "I exposed it." When the room finally began to empty, the newcomer approached her. "You could have walked away," he said again. Nia looked around the crescent room, the velvet, the quiet, the ghosts of power that lingered even after the people left. "So could they," she said. He studied her. "What happens now?" he asked. Nia exhaled. "Now," she said, "they decide whether I'm worth the trouble." He nodded. "They will." Nia didn't smile, because she already knew. The crescent room emptied in layers, not all at once, not cleanly. Power never left in a straight line. The first to go were the observers, the men with tablets and calm voices, finished with questions for now. They exited without drama, leaving behind the faint echo of authority and the certainty that nothing in this room would stay contained. Then the woman left. She didn't look at Nia as she passed. That was deliberate. Her jaw was set, her phone clutched too tightly in her hand, knuckles pale. She wasn't afraid. She was planning. Nia recognized that kind of focus. It was the kind that didn't forgive. The bald financier remained seated long after he was told he could leave. His shoulders sagged, his breathing uneven, like the adrenaline was finally draining. "This was supposed to protect me," he said quietly to no one in particular. Nia stood a few feet away, not approaching, not retreating. "It was supposed to protect someone," she replied. "Just not you." He laughed once, hollow. "You saved my life." Nia didn't answer, because that wasn't entirely true. The man in navy waited until the room was nearly empty before he spoke to her again. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could hear him without anyone else noticing. "You understand what you did?" he said. "Yes." "You burned a powerful man without touching him." "Yes." "And you made yourself visible to people who don't forget." "Yes." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded, almost respectfully. "If you ever decide you don't want to stand alone," he said, "there are places where people like you aren't wasted." Nia met his eyes. "People like me don't do well in cages," she said. A corner of his mouth twitched. "Fair." He left without another word. That left only two people in the crescent room who hadn't moved. Nia and Graphite Suit. He stood near the table, jacket buttoned, expression unreadable. The folder was gone now, the pen too. Clean slate, at least on the surface. "You think you won," he said finally. Nia didn't respond. He stepped closer, stopping just short of her space. "You didn't," he continued. "You delayed something. You inconvenienced me, but you didn't end anything." "I know," Nia said. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why do you look relieved?" She looked at him then. Really looked. "Because you don't own the language anymore," she said, "and that scares you." Something flickered across his face. Not rage, respect. It made him more dangerous. "You're going to wish you'd stayed invisible," he said. Nia held his gaze. "I tried that," she replied. "It almost killed someone." He smiled thinly. "People die every day." "Yes," Nia said. "And now, if they do, it won't be because I cleaned up your mess." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Graphite Suit stepped back. "This isn't over," he said again. "No," Nia agreed. "But this part is." He turned and walked toward the private elevator, posture composed, already rewriting the night in his head. When the doors closed behind him, the crescent room felt larger, emptier. like a stage after the audience had gone home. Miles appeared from behind the bar, pale and shaken. "Are you okay?" he asked. Nia nodded. You're fired," he added weakly. "I mean, I think I don't even know anymore." Nia almost smiled. "That's fine," she said. "I was going to quit." She untied her apron slowly, folding it with care, as if the night hadn't torn something open inside her. Miles swallowed. "They're going to come back," he said. "People like that." "I know," Nia replied. She placed the folded apron on the counter. "But next time," she added, "I won't be serving water." She walked out of the Crescent Room without looking back. Outside, the city hummed like nothing had happened. That was the lie it always told. The city didn't care what happened upstairs. Nia stepped out onto the sidewalk and blended into the late-night flow of Manhattan like she'd done 1,000 times before. Taxis hissed past. A couple laughed too loudly on the corner. Somewhere, music thumped through glass. Life continued. It always did. She walked 3 blocks before she felt it. The familiar pressure between her shoulder blades. Not fear. Awareness. She didn't turn around. She ducked into a 24-hour cafe instead. The kind with cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired and honest. She ordered black coffee, cash, no name. Sat with her back to the wall. Her phone buzzed once. Unknown number. She stared at it for a long second before unlocking the screen. "You changed the outcome tonight. That doesn't happen often. No signature, no threat. Just information." She didn't reply. The barista slid her coffee across the counter. Nia wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat ground her. The adrenaline was gone now. What remained was something quieter and heavier. Consequences. Across the street, a black sedan idled at the light longer than necessary. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. She took a sip and thought about the bald financier, how close he'd come to vanishing without understanding why. About the woman's eyes, already plotting. About Graphite Suit's smile when he realized he'd lost control of the narrative, if not the war. She had exposed one mechanism. There were thousands more. Her phone buzzed again. Different number this time. You're going to need options. People who can make noise when silence becomes dangerous. She almost laughed. Options were just cages with nicer furniture. She typed one line, then deleted it. Typed again. "I'm not looking for protection." The response came almost instantly. "Neither are we." That gave her pause. She finished her coffee, left exact change, and walked back out into the night. The sedan was gone. Good or bad. She headed toward the subway, coat pulled tight, mind already shifting from what had happened to what came next. She didn't have a job anymore. She didn't have anonymity. But she had something she hadn't had in years. Leverage. Not over people, over outcomes. At the top of the subway stairs, she stopped and looked back once, toward the direction of the Crescent Room, toward the towers where deals were already being rewritten to survive daylight. They would adjust. They always did. So would she. Nia disappeared into the crowd, not as staff, not as a symbol, not as a warning, but as a variable the system hadn't priced in. And that, she knew, was the most dangerous thing in the room.